Hey guys, before we get started, I wanted you to click on the link below to get a free copy of the Nevada Edge Guide. This guide is packed full of information about the benefits of Nevada LLCs and the tax strategies, all about using Nevada entities. Full of information that'll benefit you and your personal life. Just click the link below. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Court Christie, and today we're going to be talking about business plans and how to organize a business plan properly so that when you go out and you launch your new business, whatever it is, you have all the data that you need to be successful in your new launch. And we have an expert with us today, James Crothers from NCH, and James has been supporting the needs of entrepreneurs for over 20 years, and James is an expert in helping to pull together the information you need to have a successful plan to launch your business. So James, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely glad to be here.
Fantastic. So there's a lot that goes into a business plan. There's many different components to it, organizing it. It's really a roadmap, as we've talked about in the past, for business owners, for their success, for where they're heading. But you're better at this. Broadly speaking, how do you define what a business plan represents to a new startup company?
So to follow the lead, it really is a roadmap or a blueprint. And what it's there to do is a number of things, right? One is to help someone who's thinking about starting a business, to start giving them kind of a platform to work from. If they've never been down any kind of entrepreneurial path, there's a lot of little nuances that they're going to be learning, and it's preferable if they learn it on paper and really kind of see the ins and outs of how things work, why they're working that way. It allows them to kind of know what areas that they might have some strengths in, maybe what drove them to decide they want to go down that business path. Or they start to realize, hey, there's things that I'm not very good at. For example, maybe they're not very good at marketing, which they know is essential to the success of the business. And they go, okay, well, what's the plan then? How do I supplement what it is I know I'm not good at? Where going in without a business plan, they tend to, wear multiple hats. And, a lot of businesses fail. We have a high failure rate. And it's not because the business wasn't great or they weren't doing it properly. Maybe they just took on more than they thought or more than they should have, and it put them in that position.
Sure, and there is a lot to think about in starting any business.
Yes.
There's a lot of different sections to your business. You need to know enough about accounting to not screw it up, and maybe
Right.
You don't do the accounting. You got to know how to operate the business. Then you start getting into managing people. It just becomes more and more compounded,
Right.
all the skills that you need access to. So as one is organizing and putting together a great business plan so they have some clear direction, one of the components is to do a market analysis.
Correct.
And I know you've done a lot of this for many, many businesses. And as you're going through that process, what is it entailed in a market analysis? Like when we talk about that, what does that mean to a startup company?
Yeah, so market analysis, and again, we can dive into a little bit about different types, but the overall idea of a market analysis is to kind of learn the area, learn your field, right? This field is not new. It's got a lot of historical data, and your job is to be able to kind of go in and utilize that information, a lot of which could be found online on the internet, and you want to be able to start pulling it together. And what you're going to end up with initially is a lot of raw data that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But as you start to kind of manipulate it, line it up, all of a sudden you can start to see a path being created. And what you're looking to do with the market analysis is kind of figure out, where do I fit in? Where do I fit into this? What makes me different, right? Because in a market analysis, I'm going to know what everybody else is doing. For example, I'm going to know what the different marketing pieces are for them, what they're doing online. So I can look at it and then I might decide at that point, I'm not really doing anything different. So then what kind of market share realistically am I going to get in that particular field?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I think of all the businesses that we've helped start over the years, over the last 30 years. And, so many people jump into things because they have an idea, but
Right.
they don't have a real strong sense of the industry they're going into, the competition that they're going to be up against, the demand. You convince themselves, and like all good business owners, you convince yourself that your idea is the best idea in the world. But let's talk about a few different types of businesses that some would come to you for? And let's start with something more on a smaller scale. Let's say I wanted to open a deli or a bakery or a coffee shop or something like this. I'm in my hometown, and or I'm in a big city and I'm in my neighborhood and I want to do something fun in my neighborhood and I enjoy doing that. What would you do to walk somebody through that market analysis, that process, to learn more about whether or not this business is viable for where they want to locate it, what they're trying to do?
So talking on a local level, we know when you're going into around your area, the first step to a market analysis, typically one of the things that you'll be able to kind of determine, say it is a coffee shop, is what radius, right? You want to figure out how big do I need to go where these individuals are going to be, adequately part of my market share. So what's nice about doing it on the local level is your ability to interact with the market. So you can get out there, you can go see what everybody else is doing. For example, coffee shop, you can walk into everybody's coffee shop. You can see how far are these coffee shops distanced from one another. Was it just done that way? But are you seeing any kind of patterns with it, right? Or if it's a bigger, more condensed area, say big city, then you might notice, hey, there's like 3 or 4 on a corner. If you take a Starbucks, for example, you might find that they have it in the grocery store, in the same parking lot, and then across the street. So a lot of that is where market analysis becomes important because they've researched it, and typically they're going to base it on population, right? Local population, on how many people can we serve. And so the market analysis, you have to start digging down to figure out what can you do within your particular industry. How many people could your store potentially handle, right? So you'll look at that market around there. And then, if you look at, for example, in coffee shop, in that area, how many people, what percentage of people even drink coffee in that area? And if I've got 4 or 5 different competitors that are already there, how is that market share being split up? Then we would even get deeper and go, are we dealing with local mom and pop businesses versus corporate, right? And if we're dealing with corporate, are we able to compete? Typically, corporate's going to offer a lot of different things that the mom and pop can't, when in the way of having money to do things, where mom and pop are looking to be more cautious with how they spend and how they market to compete and kind of stay open. So there's all those little factors that come in. There's just one, it's just a few examples that we can easily continue to grow on as we're putting it together.
I think what's interesting is you talk about, running an analysis and looking at what's going on in the community and what your competition looks like and pulling it together. There's so many times that I talk to someone that, wants to open sort of a retail shop like this. And they found a location, and they're convinced the location is going to be what will make it successful. And they don't think about the traffic counts. They don't think about the accessibility of the location. They might have wanted a deli, and there was a deli that was there, a year ago, and it shut down. And maybe the owner got sick, or maybe, something happened that it wasn't successful. Well, they think they can do better, but the location's somewhat turnkey. And so you've got to be really careful, I find, at just thinking, oh, I've got the perfect spot. And I hear that all the time. We've got the perfect location. It's going to be great. And I said, well, what makes it the perfect location? Well, it's really a nice retail environment. It was already something similar, and we think we can repurpose the fixtures and the whole setup. And it's like, wait a minute. You got to back up a second. First, identify, is this what your community needs? And what's going on in the broader community with your competitors, all these things. But don't get caught up in, I found the perfect spot, because it might not be the perfect spot. Just because you fell in love with it, or the rent's cheap, or something else, it might actually be things that will actually destroy that business, and it won't be successful. So that's a local environment. What if we broaden it? Let's talk about a regional business. You might have a small brewery that you want to start selling in a broader region. Maybe you're a trucking company that you want to move product from one end of your state to the other end of your state, and you're going to be within that region itself that you're working on. How do you go about an analysis for something like that?
So as you start to grow, at least in our experience, when you start local, it's pretty much you being able to do it all because it's within reach. When you start to get into the regional, the bigger you go, or the bigger your market, the more research is out there. So if you're going from something regional, say, to national, when you're regional, especially in the state, you're going to be able to get into a lot of online research. There's actually a lot of paid sites that you can go to, but you're going to really be able to get to see on a more of a regional level what's going on in that industry. And you're going to have more outside input that you'll see. For example, trucking, you'll tend to find in most states they have a standard kind of cost model. So if you go to a big trunking company, you go right on the websites of there, and they actually show you what it costs for gas and transfer, and that's all regional data that they were able to collect, right? And these are from companies that have trucks out there, as an example, which now somebody coming in, and typically in those environments, we're looking at someone's going to own one truck to start and potentially build. They're able to get a lot more data that way. So we do a lot of regional work, and we're able to put together really comprehensive research on that and numbers. And again, there's a point where, there's always guesstimates in it until they're actually out there and they're living it. Our goal, though, is to get them as close to that accurate estimate as possible. And we've had a lot of success because we know how the research process goes. It's time consuming. So when you're looking at getting involved in it with yourself, for example, if I have somebody that wants to start a business today, I'd really try to get in their head, hey, get 90 days, even 120 days out. Give yourself that time to where you can just learn what you're getting into, because a lot of times there's a lot of rush that goes on. They get excited about it, they want to move forward with it, so they really don't do a whole lot of research. Or if they do research, it's not as accurate as it would be, because they're trying to crunch something that needs that time to kind of grow, or mushroom, if you will, into what it's going to become.
If somebody does a proper market analysis, and they do it well, and they've taken in a lot of data and kind of put it down on paper and given them a sense of what they need to do and who their competition is and where they need to be, how often do you find that the business model shifts based on the learning that they have? Are they changing directions based on having a solid business plan? Are they learning a lot in the process?
Yeah, so the one thing we can always count on in business is that nothing ever goes right, right? So we can plan and be very diligent on that, and there's always going to be kind of hiccups and things that come in. I tend to find that the better the research and the marketing is on their idea, less curvatures are going to go through, because they can kind of see ahead, right? So if you look at a traditional business plan, by industry it changes. In like transportation, you would do a 3-year. There are some that you can go 5 years. So looking 3 years down the road, kind of the goal of that is you're kind of anticipating what has happened in the market. One of the best ways to know what's going to happen is look at what has happened prior, right? So whenever we do a research, in fact, we just did a market research for a company today. We went back almost 4 years. And what we're looking at is, what is the trend? Because somebody might go, well, it had a really good year this year. Obviously, we had COVID, there was some bad. But if you average any year, say over a 4 or 5 year period, you're always going to get a pretty consistent number. And there's other industries like real estate that look at that are also that are regional, right? So if you look at what lenders look at, they might say, well, last year we had X amount of properties sell. But if you base it over 5 years, they might go, this is what the real number is. So that's the number they're looking at. So same thing with trucking or any kind of regionals, you're going to have numbers, and the better the numbers, people that are in the industry that you're going to go to, whether it's vendors, funding, they're going to know those numbers as well. So I think another part of having that knowledge is you can have intelligent conversations. Even if you've never owned that business, you can talk to someone who has, and they're not going to look at you as someone who's amateur.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And it's like the data is going to help support the success of that business.
Yes.
And if you don't spend the time digging in and crunching numbers and looking at what is going on in your landscape, you're not getting a full picture. And I think one of the things I mentioned earlier is that entrepreneurs tend to fool themselves. They tend to think that their idea is the best idea ever. And we know what the business failure rates. I mean, it's like 80% in the first 2 years. Most businesses don't exist anymore. And so many don't even get off the ground. Somebody's got an idea, but they can't get the financing, or they don't have the time to commit to it, or they can't find the right location, and just many things can go haywire in the process. So let's take a broader look. Let's look at, like, what would I need to do a market analysis if I wanted to go national? Let's say we're talking about the United States. We'll leave the world out of it at this point. And I've got a business, and it's an e-commerce business. Could be anything. Maybe I'm selling belt buckles that I have figured out how to craft in my shop, and I have a couple of people that can help me. Or you might have products that you're importing from another country that you're trying to sell in the United States.
Yeah.
How do you go about a market analysis for an e-commerce business on a national basis?
So that's probably the easiest, right? Because when we go national, somebody out there is doing something similar, right? Very rare are we going to have somebody that's coming with something brand new that no one's ever tried. Plus, you have a lot of research data because you have things like Amazon, right? Even Walmart now, which has gotten big online. So when you get into the retail outlet world, we're going to be taking a very different path because you can see, what you're competing with. For example, a lot of retailers have to compete with the free shipping, right? They're 90%, or if not more, competing with Amazon, who can undercut them all the time, which end up making more sense to put their products into that store. So I think when you're doing a market analysis on national, I think you're looking at a lot of different perspectives, which is, do I even have my own store? Right? Or should I go with the national model where everything's built in for me? A lot of those models, you have a lot of your website models, a lot of your e-commerce models, you have things like Shopify. So there's all these platforms to where, does it make even sense to go out and become this person that's going to invest thousands of dollars into something that they're now trying to build that direct clientele in versus going somewhere where they already have all the clientele they need with that unique product? Or is it a mixture of both? These are things that are easy to come up with on the bigger piece because they're going to be able to go out there and look at these numbers. They're going to see what similar products are selling for. They can trend those products. And so I think as you go from what you can touch, then you're looking at what you can kind of find to now there's big players in most of these games that you can now tap into. And you learn the most from those who've been in that the longest in our experience, right?
It's interesting, for risk of a business is, let's just say starting a trucking company. If you don't have a lot of experience, hopefully you do before you go into a trucking business. Or if you have a deli that you want to start, there's the risk of the time, the resources, the money, the opening a shop, the location, the finding it, the commitment to a lease, all these things that are involved. I think what's fun about e-commerce is, you don't have to take a ton of risk. Yeah. You don't have to spend a fortune. You'll probably want a web presence. Like you said, you can just go on Amazon, or you can get a turnkey shop on Shopify or Etsy or something like that, that make it really easy for you to sort of test market your product, figure out if it's out there. But I think still, you need to understand what you're going to be up against. I've had so many clients that we've worked with in the past that, I have a twist on an existing product. I'm making it better. It's better quality. Okay, does the quality come with a higher price? Well, yes, it does, but it's better quality. And I said, I understand, but people are very conscious of pricing. And so are you sure that you can actually sell a product like that? Because do you have any competition selling prices at a higher price point in the market that you're going to be going after? And those are things you need to know. And
Absolutely.
If you don't know how to go about doing the research, it's best to hire somebody that can actually help you organize this, because again, you tend to have blinders on. You're convinced that your idea, your product, or your service is going to be accepted by everyone who's smart. Anyone that's smart gonna want this product. They're just gonna come running to get what I have. It's like, no. Trust me, if it was that easy, everybody would be in business for themselves. It doesn't happen like that. So I think it's really important for people as they're starting the idea phase and putting it down on paper, so they do have this roadmap of a business plan, that they get the market analysis done correctly. And I always believe it's best to have the support of a team or people that can help you pull it together. And I know that you're very intimate in this process, and you're helping hundreds of people every month put business plans together, organize their ideas and thoughts. But what's nice about having an outside party help you organize it and put it together is you're going to find the blind spots. They might not like to hear it, but you're going to find the competition, and you're going to find the issues that may be something that they've never thought about before. And all of a sudden, they're going to have to adjust and reshape their model. And I think that's what's so important about it, is the more information that you have, where you're not just convincing yourself you have the best thing ever, but you put that information, you put it down on paper, you start to read it, you start to see, and you have to reshape your business as you go along. So that's why I think it's so valuable to have resources like what NCH offers, is a complete business plan that's thought out for you. with a lot of focus on making sure that you're not making a mistake right up front with the right analysis and data that goes into it. So I think that's just valuable, and everybody listening should know that there's research to be done in any business. You just don't go run off.
Yeah, and I also think it's important too. A lot of entrepreneurs end up getting into business trying to do it all themselves. And when they come to NCH and they work with us, because most of them think that they cannot afford to have good people on their team, and they have to do it because the funding's not there. And once they start going through the process with us, they start to see that having a team that's a different, like you said, we were very honest and blunt with a lot of things because we've done this so many times. There's not really an industry we haven't been in that we bring things they've never even thought of. But they start to appreciate the fact that having kind of outside voices, and then we're able to then show them. A lot of times we'll say, when you came to us, you didn't think you could afford to hire, a person who's even better than you in that, in marketing, for example. But they start to find that when you plan it, you can do that because now you're planning out budgeting and you're doing everything that starts to incorporate the needs of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing today.
Absolutely.
Great information on market analysis and why it's so important as a part of a business plan.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And for all of you tuning in today, thanks for learning more. Another piece of the whole business plan and what you need to be thinking about as you do your market analysis. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer, fantastic. You've got some gems here as far as ways of going about gaining information about the business that you are going into. And if you prefer to have experts help support you and build it for you, then come to NCH. We're here to help you. We do this day in and day out, hundreds of business plans for our clients every month. It works fantastically well. They love the support that they get along the way. So I appreciate that. And thanks for tuning in today to another edition of Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Court Christie, and please like and subscribe. It helps us spread the word. Have a great day.